Welcome to The Pure Perspective, the podcast where we explore the many pathways to recovery. I'm your host, Kyle Van Blerkum, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. At The Pure Perspective, we're on a mission to shine light onto the journey of healing, resilience, and hope. Each episode, we bring you powerful stories of individuals who have faced substance use and mental health challenges head-on, along with insights from trained professionals and family members offering unwavering support. Whether you're on your own path to recovery or seeking to understand the struggles and triumphs of others, you're in the right place. This podcast is a safe space for inspiration, connection, and growth. Get ready for candid conversations, heartfelt stories, and valuable insights right here on The Pure Perspective. Welcome back to The Peer Perspective. My next guest is a forensic peer support specialist who practices in Minnesota. Her personal journey through alcoholism and mental health challenges, coupled with her role in aiding individuals with justice involvement, brings a unique perspective to our discussion. Without further ado, let's welcome our next guest, Jamie Young. All right, Jamie. So first off, I just want to say that I appreciate you letting me come over here and talk to you a little bit today.
Yeah, it's nice to have it in my living room.
Yeah, comfy, right?
Oh, yeah. Got a blanket on and everything.
Awesome. Well, so if you want to start out, I know you said you would share a little bit about your story and kind of how you got into peer support. So maybe I should back up a little bit. You do peer support.
Correct.
So we have that in common. I do peer support too.
Yep.
But you have... what did you call it? It's like
it's like an extra part of the certification. It's called forensic endorsement.
Okay, so what does forensic mean in the peer support world?
So forensic in the peer support world is basically a way to say that you have experience, like lived experience, navigating the criminal justice system in some sort of way.
Okay. So you primarily work with people that are justice involved?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, cool. So, if you want to talk a little bit about your story and how you got into peer support.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's important to share my story because I do hear, I've been, in the recovery community in general about 6 years. And I know in the beginning for me, I actually had a hard time in the recovery community because I almost felt like I didn't belong. And I think it was because my story was different from others, but I think I looked at it as that I wasn't like, I didn't have a big enough rock bottom, or I didn't go through all the things that other people went through. So it was all in my own head, of course, because the whole goal is like, if you feel like you have an issue with alcohol or drugs and you want to go to a meeting or you want to be in recovery, then that's what you should try.
Right.
But just a little bit of background, I had a really normal childhood. There was nothing too traumatic that happened to me. I didn't grow up around, my parents were not alcoholics or addicts. My brother, I just have one brother, and he, I feel like, did like the partying thing, but never really had a lot of consequences. And I actually started drinking because drinking is like I would say my DOC, drug of choice. But eventually I just did whatever. But I didn't start even drinking regularly until after 18 years old. And I hear a lot of people in their stories say that, like, yeah, I had my first beer when I was 12. Right. And it's just different, And I think in the beginning of my recovery, I just was comparing myself a lot to others. And I was like, man, maybe I don't need to be here. But I definitely need to be here. But yeah, I think my drinking started mostly to fit in, which is very normal for people. It was to fit in. I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin. Partying and drinking, as we know, in Wisconsin is very normal.
Oh, it's normal. Yeah.
It is normal. Yeah. I've learned that it's actually not that normal everywhere else. No. But that's what we're used to here. And, you know, I just kind of started that. Actually, the first time I ever got truly drunk was at my high school graduation party. Oh. And everyone told me how fun I was. So I was like, okay, I can do this. If I'm fun. You know, I was kind of always like the kind of chubby girl, like she's really funny, but you know, and that really created a lot of like self-esteem issues for me growing up. And I found that when I would drink, I would forget about that. And I'd forget about like my self-esteem, my codependency, relationship issues. And I just, you know, it's like when they say it's like liquid courage, that's what it was. And that really started my drinking career. And it didn't really ever stop after that. And I mean, I continued to drink until there was never a slowing down period. Yeah. And then I have a couple DUIs, so that was like some of my, you know, obviously my biggest like legal, you know, and justice involvement consequences. I never spent a substantial amount of time in jail. I was lucky in a way growing up in a small town, I think, and then where I would drink, it was like I could just almost like go in jail for the night and then just be let out, or usually like my mom would have to pick me up, which was always embarrassing. But then, you know, when I got my second DUI was when the consequences started to be a little bit more great and I had to spend a little more time in jail.
Not a ticket anymore, right?
No, not just a slap on the wrist. My first DUI was definitely felt like a slap on the wrist. I didn't lose my license for all that long. Mm-hmm. And, you know, my DUIs were actually 9 years apart, which is interesting because obviously I didn't just drive drunk twice in 9 years. I never stopped drinking through all of that. My drinking was always regular. I was an everyday drinker. And it definitely ruined many things for me. I didn't ever go to treatment in the beginning. I never went to detox. I never went to treatment. A lot of my consequences outside of the DUIs were very much emotional consequences. And financial consequences. I probably moved back in with my mom, lived in her basement, I mean, probably at least 5 to 6, 10 times while I was drinking because I just could not make good financial decisions. I could hold a job, but I wasn't ever like, I wasn't a good worker. I don't know how I held jobs down, and my relationships, you know, specifically with men, were terrible. And when I got my second DUI, I had actually met someone who was in recovery a week before, or about a week before that. And we met online, and the night that we met in person, I like dropped him back off at his sober house, actually. And then I went home that night and partied because I didn't want to drink around him. I knew that'd be rude, right? But I wasn't going to stop drinking. But that's kind of when I learned, you know, more about like what a sober house was, or what a halfway house was, or what an AA meeting was. And I was like, that's great for you, but I'm not interested in that part of it. But actually that night, I got my second DUI.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what we like to call higher power stuff right there.
Right.
Because that's what led me into, that's my sober date, February 11th, 2018, was when I got my second DUI.
Oh, wow, so you're coming up on 6 years?
Yeah, almost 6 years.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of like, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there, but that's kind of the general idea of how I actually got to River Falls. I've been sober the whole time I've been here.
Yeah.
I've lived here almost 6 years as well, so that's kind of how I got in here and what led me to like recovery in general.
So did you, I mean, at what point did you start, I mean, looking for a job in the recovery field, or, you know, doing peer support?
Yeah, so actually it was not all that long ago. I had a pretty tumultuous relationship in the beginning of my sobriety, and I really had to address some other things like codependency, mental health, and all that. And then the job that I originally got when I moved to River Falls was in Hudson, and I got fired from it. Like, in my recovery, I'd never been fired from a job before, and it just, like, destroyed me at first. I was so angry and so pissed off about it, like I didn't deserve it. And now I look back, I'm like, I can't believe she didn't fire me sooner, because I was not in a good mental health spot. And now it's like one of those things I look back on and be like, thank God I got fired.
Right.
But after I got fired, I worked at a different job that was like, really all I had was like a work cell phone, and I was very much left to my own devices and a lot of freedom. And I knew that short term it was going to work for me, but long term I needed to do something. And I was sick of working jobs where I felt like there was absolutely no purpose. Like, I worked in insurance for like 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I hope there's people out there that like working insurance, but I'm not one of them, so I don't know to this day why I did it so long. So I started hearing about what peer support was, but I didn't really understand it. Living in Wisconsin, I would look up like Wisconsin peer support, and at that time I just didn't find a lot of resources, and maybe I just didn't look into it for far enough. But then I found something on, I think it was actually like the Teen Challenge website, about peer support, and to email this person. I was like, I got to figure out more about this. And so I emailed them, and they're like, we don't have any spots open, but if you go here, you can actually do the training for free. And even though I'm a Wisconsin resident, I'm in Minnesota all the time, and we're so close to Minnesota here that they said that it would be okay that I did the Minnesota, certified peer recovery support. So it's about almost 2 years ago I did the training, and then I didn't even get a job in it until I've been at my current job since June 2022, and I didn't really know what I was looking for when I was going to find a peer support job, because it's very open. A lot of places, like a lot of treatment centers, might have one, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to work at a treatment center. And I kind of always had some sort of dream or goal of actually working in a jail. And again, higher power, God, absolutely. I'm just scrolling on Indeed, and I find this like mental health services nonprofit that has what's called my team there is called Corrections Integrated Support, and it's a grant funded team, and they were looking for peer support. And it was specifically for people who are justice involved, and that have either like some sort of mental health, symptoms or issues, however you want to call it, and most likely are going to have some sort of substance use disorder.
Right.
I applied for it, and I didn't hear back right away. And I actually had applied for another peer support job, and they offered me the job, but there was something about this job that I was like, I need to figure out if they're going to hire me or not. And so I called the guy that interviewed me. I was like, I need to know if you're going to hire me. I just said that, and he was like, yeah, we are. He's like, I'm just like talking with like HR about how much we're going to pay you. And then, the rest is kind of history.
The rest is history.
Yeah. Coolest thing ever. It's absolutely the best job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you work with people that are in justice involved. So what does that mean?
So justice involved, kind of like my definition of it is, that can mean you're currently in jail, you're on probation, you're on parole, or you have kind of some current justice involvement. Would be like maybe you have like an open case, maybe you're awaiting sentencing. Like, it could be really anything, but justice involvement, I look at it as some sort of I don't like to call it this, but people know it as like having a criminal history.
Okay.
That's why we say justice involvement. It just is more you learn in this role to call things like differently. And criminal history is still okay to use, but that's why we like calling it justice.
Stigmatized, or
Exactly. Yeah. It's nice to give it more of a, I don't know if politically correct is the right word, but just also doesn't sound as harsh.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so can you talk a little bit about how the boundaries are different with a peer support person versus maybe like a therapist or a probation officer, especially when working in a role, like this, where you are working with people that have that involvement with the court system?
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing about peer support is that we do get a little bit more of, I mean, obviously we still have to have boundaries in place, right? That's always important in any sort of role, but I don't consider my role professional in the sense that I don't have, I'm certified, but I don't have there's not a degree for this, there's not a license for this, and because a peer support role is based on your lived experience, your boundaries can be slightly looser, and I like that because I can talk about myself, right?
Right.
So, like, an example would be, like, a lot of times the people that I meet at my job, I'm meeting them for the first time while they're in jail.
Okay.
And, no one likes to be in jail, but they get excited about, clients I meet get excited about being able to talk to somebody,
right,
while they're in jail that isn't a parole officer, or a probation officer or their attorney. And so that's the cool thing is that, like, when I meet them in intake, I just treat them like, it's like they're not even in jail. I'm like, hey, I'm Jamie, I'm a peer support. Do you know what that is? And I can explain that to them. And then I can tell them a little bit, going back to the beginning when I told you about my story, I don't go into that much detail, but I'm basically like, yeah, I have lived experience, as in, like, I even talk about my mental health issues. Like, I'm diagnosed with major depressive disorder and ADHD, so I experience mental health symptoms. I'm almost 6 years sober, so I understand substance use disorder, and I haven't done a substantial amount of time in jail, but I understand what it's like to be in jail,
right,
and have, justice involvement. And so the boundaries, I think, are just a little bit more loose in the sense that I can talk about myself more than maybe, like, a therapist is going to share, or a PO, or the other part of my team at my job is a mental health practitioner, and they're more like the clinical role. I know a lot of the clinical role to it, but I don't have to be clinical.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So if, and actually I have some questions here, so I don't want to double dip, but if somebody comes to you, and they're having an issue, and, you've established kind of some of, you've shared some of your personal experience, what's the reporting like? So, I mean, if they say, hey, I'm really struggling, I might have had a brief return to use, are you required to go back and tell, the rest of your team? Like, how does that look?
One of the things I always tell my clients is that I'm not going to talk to your PO. That's not my job to report anything to your probation officer, and that doesn't mean that I'm not going to encourage them to be honest, especially if something about returning to use is in what they're telling me. I'm going to personally always promote honesty, but it is not my job to tell their PO, or if they're at a sober house, that I'm not going to tell the sober house manager, and that's because we're building rapport and trust.
Right.
And it's not that, of course I'm required to report some things because I'm a mandated reporter in this role, because the people I work with are considered vulnerable adults. So obviously if someone is, talking about, like, wanting to hurt themselves or another person, well, then I don't have a choice. I'm going to have to report that. But the goal for me is for them to not feel like, going back to those boundaries, not feel like they can't tell me those things.
Right.
Because how can I help if they're unable to trust me, is the bottom line.
Right. What a powerful relationship. And I feel like it fills in so many gaps, right? I mean, just having that person that they can open up to in those situations, I think, is really pretty powerful.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about what the forensic peer, for what that means. In your experience, what are some challenges faced by individuals with justice involvement who are trying to recover from substance use disorder specifically, or mental health?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that I'm not sure if everyone, realizes this, but I think it's important to see, like, I think if you are someone who just doesn't know a lot about people who are in jail in general, or people with substance use disorder or mental health issues, a lot of, I know, and I can even admit that I thought this, like, it was before I knew all this, it was like people who are in jail are criminals, and that's probably where they should be.
Right.
And that's not to say now that the crimes that people are committing, I understand why they're going to jail for them. But there's a cycle that people go through, especially with substance use, where you get deep into your substance use, and that's where that criminal thinking starts to happen, because a lot of people in their alcoholism or addiction, maybe they can't hold a job, maybe they can't hold relationships, and their goal is to get that next drink, get that next high. And if they don't have money, what are they going to do?
Right.
They're going to probably steal. So there's going to be theft. There's going to be, maybe you're home. Maybe a lot of people who have, a long history of substance use or even a short history of substance use, they're going to be homeless. What are they going to do? They're going to break in somewhere to have things. They're going to steal food. You'll see that cycle. I see so often there's like a drug charge of some sort of possession charge that is coupled with some sort of theft charge.
Right.
And it's usually like trying to steal food from like Walmart or Target. It's so often, it's such a cycle. Mm-hmm. So I see that a lot, and I think that's good to look at that bigger picture of it. Like, they're not just a criminal. It's like you can see this, like,
they're trying to meet their basic needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole goal, though, is like, as a peer support, meeting someone at the jail that's hopefully being released soon, is how can they get back into the community where they're going to have their basic needs. Like, that's the biggest thing, is to have some sort of stability, because with stability, people are so much less likely to use as soon as they're out of jail.
Mm-hmm. In those situations where people are incarcerated, and what are some things that you do to kind of bridge them into society again? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, my specific program is a lot like a reentry program. The cool thing about my specific one is because it's grant funded. A lot of reentry programs are through like social services. So like they would only be able to kind of really assist people that are going to remain in that county that they're in jail in.
Sure. Because
they're through the county. The cool thing about our program is that we don't bill insurance, and we're not by county. So if someone's, in jail in this county but lives in another county, the cool thing is that we can kind of follow them if they want us to, because We're voluntary as well. So a lot of what we try to do is figure out first, do they need to go to treatment of some sort? Is that kind of the goal? Are they going to be able to furlough to treatment from the jail? And so the first thing is really determining where they're going next to see what kind of care they might need. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it is some sort of substance use treatment. And they might have these in Wisconsin, but I don't totally know. I know a lot more about Minnesota, but Minnesota also has what's called an IRTS facility, and that's more geared towards mental health, because it's like intensive rehabilitation, like therapy services.
Sure.
And that's more geared towards mental health. That can be a longer program, like 90 days. Like, you have to be clean there, and sober there, but they really help with like med management, coping skills, kind of getting your mental health to a more stable place. Some people might need to go there. And then just seeing like, even like what to me might feel simple, but are not always simple. Like, do they have, if they don't have a job, are they on some sort of general assistance? Do they have, food stamps, or I guess we really call them like EBT cards now. Or if they're not going to any of those things, where are they going?
Right.
Because the key is to not get out of jail and have nowhere to go.
Right.
Because chances are, if they're going to be homeless, they're going to use. Chances are, if they're going back to an old environment, they might not have the best support. So that's the first thing that we try to do, and it's a lot of my work is like resourcing. Like right now in the back of my car, I have like 10 winter jackets because a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't have clothes. I don't have a winter jacket.
I still have to get you your jackets.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of them. I know, yeah. I was just thinking I'm going to have to bring some of them to a coat drive because, of course, it works out that, like, everyone needed one last year, and now there's not as big of a need this year. But it's just cool to be able to have that. You know, I even have, like, little, like, plastic bags in the back of my car that have, like, socks, boxers, or underwear, just because people don't always have that when they leave the jail. Like, when you go to jail, you have the clothes on your back and maybe, like, you know, your phone, your wallet, and that's it. So it's really just determining where they're going to go next and how we can help them get there. And I think a really cool thing about people who are in jail is a lot of time they're really honest.
Yeah.
I feel like because they're like, you know what, this is where I'm at and this is what I need to do. And so often I will hear this and I think it's just really like, it's being that vulnerable and being able to admit this. So they're like, if I don't have anywhere to go after I get released from jail, I'm going to go use. Sure. I'm going to relapse.
Yeah.
And so I need help. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty amazing.
It is.
All right. How does the concept of recovery change or adapt for individuals dealing with legal issues and substance use challenges in a forensic setting?
Yeah, so I think for some people, having the, like, some sort of justice involvement or consequences right away, they're like, okay, like, I realize, like, maybe this is my rock bottom and I need to do something. And I do see that sometimes where people get, like, one charge and they're like, and they've never been to jail before and they're like, I'm never doing this again. This was terrible.
Right.
And so I think it's a motivation, you know, after you've been in jail. Like, if anyone out there has been in jail, you probably don't want to be there. And so they do try to turn things around and do the treatment thing, you know, whatever that may look like, and then try to slowly maybe build back the things that they were missing. But there are some people that I run into, and this is honestly more often than not, that there's that, like, that cycle I was talking about before. It's just having some sobriety, using, you know, relapsing, and then eventually a new charge. So there are some options out there, like drug court. The county that I'm contracted with, they have a drug court program. I think they're working on getting, like, a mental health treatment.
Oh, cool.
Like, court program. Like, you know, something that, again, is geared more towards mental health, but mental health and substance use, of course, go hand in hand.
Right.
And I think how it can look really different, like, for someone who has a lot of justice involvement and also struggles with substances, is that it's just really stressful.
Yeah.
I think what could feel like the easiest thing to do is just say, you know, F it, and almost, like, give up. But I see people really struggle with that. It's like they finally get a hold of, like, staying sober, but then they're still dealing with those legal consequences.
Yep.
And the cool thing about Minnesota is they're a big second chance state, which really helps. Instead of just shoving someone in jail, they might still have to be in jail, but they really give people a chance to try treatment. And if treatment doesn't work, they might end up back in jail, and sometimes they get a third, fourth chance.
Sure.
And, I mean, I know I've heard for so long the average time that someone goes to treatment is like 7 times before they get it.
10 for me.
Yeah. Yep, sometimes it definitely more. I mean, I have a client that's been to treatment over 20 times, but he's been sober for almost a year now.
Wow.
So it's, I think it's a bigger challenge because it's like you feel like you get, you know, some recovery, and then all of a sudden you are dealing with the consequences of a charge that, 'cause a charge sometimes takes months and months for you to actually get sentenced for.
Right.
But the cool thing is that if they're doing really well in that period of time before, like, they get sentenced, maybe they won't be going to prison then, which is, the goal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think in the justice setting, I just know from my own experience that sometimes people have a little bit more rigid ideas of what recovery looks like and that treatment might not work for people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you advocate for individuals who, are, maybe don't look that great on paper?
Yeah. One thing I have noticed too, and it's really helped in my own recovery and views on recovery and perspective, because I love AA so much, and that's what has worked for me for a long time. And so even though I knew like people would be doing recovery differently in this setting, I just couldn't believe how many people were like, yeah, I'll go to treatment, but I'm never going to an AA meeting. Or, treatment isn't going to work for me. I've already been to however many of them. Or there's people who it is shocking the amount of people that are like, yeah, I'm going to stop doing meth, but I'll probably still drink and smoke weed. Mm-hmm. And it's really taken definitely a humbling experience to not just be like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
right.
You can't do that. Do you know that you're an addict? Because that's not going to work. Because for me, sobriety and recovery for me is absolute. Like, I don't, besides maybe caffeine and vaping, I don't drink, I don't do any drugs whatsoever, and that's sobriety to me. But that's not how it looks for everyone. And so when people are more rigid in their ways, I just again go back to my lived experience, or I don't tell them like names of people, but I'll talk about other clients that I've seen in my experience have that same line of thinking, and they just kind of, gave up, kind of surrendered a little bit and tried something different.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, you could try this and it could work. Like, the worst case scenario is that, you can be like, well, I tried it and it didn't work, but it's not going to be permanent, so why not give it a shot? And I find that a lot of times there's not really an argument against that, and they're like, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. So it's just not being like, just definitely trying to meet people where they're at is the best policy. But, encouraging them to try something different without telling them they need to is really, I think, how I try to go about it.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned it, and without obviously giving names, can you talk a little bit about maybe a success story that you've seen, or how, peer support has impacted, someone in a positive way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have tons of those. With this line of work, you can see things really go, like, not to be like too like dark and negative, but I've had clients that have passed away, and that is obviously horrific, but that is a reality of addiction, especially with fentanyl being as rampant as it is. But the rewarding part and the other side of that is that there are a lot of success stories. One in particular is a gentleman who, when I started this job, I met him for the first time, so last year, like summer of last year, and he had already been incarcerated for like months before that. And a long criminal history, just a traumatic life from the start. Been through it all, struggled with substance use, got into some really bad criminal activity, and it was looking, and he already been to prison numerous times, and it's looking like this most recent charge is that he's probably going to go back to prison. And typically we work with people who are probably re-entering into the community soon. That's kind of like the goal, is to, again, bridging that gap between people getting back out in the community. But he they can message us on the kiosk at the jail. He messaged us for like 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, like, talked to my supervisor. I'm like, can I just, like, meet with this guy?
Yeah.
Like, can we talk about how persistent he is? And met with him. Such a cool guy. Super talented in art, with art. And he actually has murals all over the jail, which is really cool. They let him do that. And when I first met him, just everything about any sort of police officer, correctional officer, any sort of a judge, lawyer, they were all just working against him. He hated them all.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought they would ever try to see his side to anything, and that they didn't want anything good for him. And, there wasn't a lot of, like, outside things that I could help him with because of his case. But I would just talk to him, and we worked together actually on... I printed him off pages of the DBT therapy workbook, and he worked on those, and we'd just talk, and slowly things started changing, and he was part of the jail treatment program, and so he has a lot of support in that. They asked him to start kind of like mentoring other people in the jail, so that really gave him purpose. The murals they let him paint gave him purpose, and it was just like weird. Like when you look at it, like I say weird sarcastically, like you give someone purpose
Right.
while they're in jail, and suddenly they're like, oh, maybe the correctional officers here don't hate me. Maybe there is a judge or a lawyer out there who actually wants to see me be successful. And, just totally changing his mind about the way he looks at any sort of like authoritative power in the justice system.
Yeah.
And so a couple weeks ago, he had a hearing, and his bail is really high. And actually, at that time, he had no bail. He was held there without bail. And so they were going to address that, if his bail could be at least lowered, possibly, because he was going to have to... They're still, like, contesting a lot of things, and it was going to be continued. But the goal was, like, he's been in jail for a year and a half. Like,
oh, wow.
And they were never interested in letting him out. And at this hearing, this judge was just like, there's a lot of talk, and all of a sudden he was going to be let out on an ankle monitor, and they actually, with conditions, they put his bail at $10,000. So of course, with a bail bondsman, $1,000.
Wow.
So, and they slapped an ankle monitor on him. He was out of jail that day, and he called me right away, and he was just like, I'm going to keep in contact with you. He's like, I'm really nervous. This was so last minute.
Yeah.
Like, just no time to prepare. And
right.
he feels a lot of safety in jail.
Right.
But it's been a struggle for him the last couple of weeks. But, I was just sitting here, one night, and he sent me a text message. He's like, I'm having really bad thoughts. Like, I just want to go back to jail. He's like, I'm literally ready to just walk back to the jail, and that's where I'm safe. And he's like, I'm thinking of, like, maybe doing something stupid to essentially probably get back to jail.
Right.
And we talked through it, and just the fact that he could reach out and text me and say that, and I'm not taking the credit that I'm, like, the one who, like, saved him, in that moment, but I'm sure it helped, and he's got a lot of support on the outside. But if this keeps going well, he's probably not going to go to prison if he keeps doing what he's doing, working on getting a job, working on finding a place to live. He's got an opportunity to actually paint at the public library where he lives, and to continue sharing his story at the jail. They're already asking him to come back and, like, speak to other people at the jail. Like, I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite, like, success stories. And his story isn't over yet. And, unfortunately, there's always a chance that he could go to prison. But I have hope and faith that that's not what's going to happen, because he's continuing to do the right thing, because he has purpose, and because he has peer support. He has a therapist. He has people at the jail that he has a relationship with that believe in him. He has sober people in his life. His mom is really supportive. Like, I just don't see how he could even fail with all that finally in place for him.
Sounds like a huge shift just in his outlook. And
huge.
It just took somebody maybe, showing some interest and
Yep.
Wow, that's a really cool story.
Yeah, yep. I'm really excited to see what his future looks like, and that's the cool part. Is that I say that I haven't noticed how much I've said that's the cool part. Everything's cool about the job. That's why, but it's like I know that I'm a role in that, but to like kind of step back and watch him do these things on his own, but like still like kind of just ask for that advice. That's the cool part, because eventually I don't want him to like need me, if that's you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like
You're working yourself out of a job.
Yeah, because if he can figure those things out on his own, and of course we always need somebody to be there for us. I don't think humans are ever designed to be alone in anything, but the less he has to lean on me or other supports is good, because then he can really start working on supporting others, which will keep whatever his program looks like really strong.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Could you share an example of where forensic peer support made a significant... Oh, you just did that. Nah.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's see. What else do I have here? What strategies or approaches have you found most effective when supporting individuals with justice involvement?
I would say that it's just treating them like they are. Because just treating them like they're any other person that you talk to.
Yeah.
Not showing that they're different. And because, I mean, in a sense, they're not. But also just trying to stay positive and realistic with them. And honesty, being honest with them about their situation. Like, that's my strategy, is just, I'm just really myself with them. I don't ever try to appear that I know everything, or that I'm the only way that my version of recovery or what I'm doing is the only way to be successful. Like we said before, I think the most important part of this type of job is meeting someone where they're at, and being people-centered in general is what helps the best. That's like my strategy. And I mean, my other strategy is just laughing, having fun. There are so many, like being in jail and having charges and worrying about where they're going to live. I mean, those are all serious things, and we're going to work on those things, but, like, I'm always cracking jokes.
Yeah.
I'm always being funny. I'm always, like, I make fun of myself a lot, and people seem to enjoy that. But just not making it feel like that everything is a crisis, even though a lot of times it is. We got to have fun. Everything in life is just way too serious.
Yeah, especially in that setting. I mean, it's probably nice to get a little bit of a break, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. Obviously, they look forward to, visits with my team, because, I get some other cells. Sometimes they're locked down most jails are short-staffed. That's just the way it is. There's a lot of times a high turnover rate, especially with, correctional officers. And so sometimes they're locked down in a cell for 23 hours a day, and that's just not okay. Yeah. People are not designed to be isolated like that, so if I can get them out of their cell for a little bit, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Yep.
You talked a little bit about the stigmas that surround mental health as a whole, substance use. What are some things that you do to address some of the stigmas relating to substance use or mental health, especially with the individuals that you're working with? So, I know even for myself, therapy, treatment, I was resistant in the beginning to those concepts. Like, I don't want to tell somebody about my problems, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage that? And then we'll do final thoughts too.
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's a lot less resistance for treatment-based things like substance use treatment. There really isn't a whole lot of resistance to that I've found. People are willing to go to treatment, and I would say 90% of the time it's because they really want to go to treatment. The other 10% of the time is they just want to do whatever they need to do to get out of jail.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And that's fair. I get it. I feel like even if that's the case, they're going to get something out of treatment anyway.
Right.
So that's cool. But with mental health, I mean, a nice aspect of my program is that we have a therapist on our team.
Oh, cool.
And if we can build rapport with them, then maybe they'll give therapy a try. And a lot of times I hear, well, I've tried therapy before. Well, then I try to do that motivational interviewing and all those type of skills where I ask those like questions where like, I hear you that you went to therapy before. What do you think of, like, what parts of therapy did you like, and would you be willing to try it again?
Sure.
And if they're like, no, then maybe I'll just stop addressing it, because I'm not going to force them into anything. But again, talking about how, like, currently I'm in therapy. I see my therapist once a week.
Yeah.
And I talk about how it's taken me a few years to find a therapist that I really like, and I love my therapist now. And just talking again about my experience with it and how it's looked like for me, and how I say things all the time like, everybody I think could benefit from therapy.
Sure.
So just helping them understand that, like, they're not really unique in their struggles, without telling them you're not unique at all. Like, you're not special. But just making it feel normal. Like, it's not like, I'm not like, oh my gosh, yeah, you need therapy, things like that. It's just talking to them about how it could really help, and you want to see them benefit from it. And that's the same thing with even seeing a psychiatrist too. There's a lot of, like, people are either one way or another about med management, but when I talk about medications and how those can help, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist, but I talk about, meds that I take that help even me out. There's not a magic pill that's going to fix me, but these meds have I can easily say they've helped me be able to even out and, like, actually focus on some things in my life that I want to do better at. And so I don't mind taking them.
Yeah.
So yeah, to just, like, break that stigma, I just try to tell people that there's so many people out there that have trauma, and the biggest piece, especially with struggling with substance use, is that you can stay sober, right? Some people can stay sober, but if you're not working on the mental health piece, which does include therapy, psychiatry, or even like actual, like, physical health, then, I mean, what are you doing? Eventually it's just not going to work anymore.
Right. You had mentioned earlier an initiative with the winter jackets. Can you talk a little bit about more about any other initiatives and how people can maybe help? Whether that's supporting people in jail or with the organization that you work for.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We the winter jackets is a big thing. Again, I have a lot of extra right now, but I think that, like, ways to support are, I mean, you can ask me, like, about, like, off this,
Sure.
episode, like, if you want to know more about where I work, because it is a nonprofit, and how you can help in that way. But if there's ever opportunities where you can go to a jail, which there are, sometimes you have to look for it, like, go to a jail and just do any sort of volunteer work within that area, go for it. Sometimes, like, the jail I work with is really open, and sometimes they let people come in and, like, listen to people who have justice involvement and listen to what they have to say. I really think the big thing is to learn more about people that you might look at as criminals, and see why they're criminals.
Right.
And just keeping an open mind. And yeah, just if you ever see anything, there's not really a good example, but, like, anything online that supports people who are in jail. Like, there's the Minnesota Freedom Fund is a good one that helps people pay bail in Minnesota. Just, like, I think the biggest help is just, like, changing people's perspective about what they think about people that are in jail.
They're not all just criminals.
No.
Usually there's something else there.
Yeah, they're all...
Yeah.
We're all very similar, even those of you who have not been to jail. And I'm just really thankful that, although it's just like scratching the surface, they're really, I say they as in like, you know, the criminal justice system is really starting to recognize mental health.
Yeah.
And the role that mental health plays in substance use and criminal thinking. And yeah, so the biggest piece of advice is to just learn more about it and see ways you can help, because you might be able to help in a way that's unexpected, like outside of just like, you know, jackets or clothing. You know, there's places that help with haircuts. There's places that you know, where you can donate like hygiene products, anything like that, like those simple basic needs that we might take for granted. Like, there's always people that need them, and a lot of times it's people that are coming out of jail, because the majority of the people that come out of jail are homeless.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
You know, we have a couple minutes, or about a minute left. Can you just maybe say your final thoughts on people that maybe are on the fence about getting into recovery or exploring, you know, what that might look like? What would you say?
For sure. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to be in recovery. You know, I'll just share a little bit about, like, me. I've been in AA for, like, AA has been my thing for almost all my recovery, but doing the job that I'm doing, along with, you know, and learning more about other people's stories in recovery. You know, I'm exploring more with, you know, being part of a recovery church. I've always been kind of part of one, but I'm trying to be more involved, like with like Celebrate Recovery and checking that out, and you know, addressing mental health. But if you're on the fence about it, my thought is always going to be is to just show up for a meeting.
Give it a try.
Give it a try. If you hate it, you don't ever have to come back again. If it's absolutely appalling and terrifying, well, you did what you're supposed to do, is try. But the recovery community here, and really anywhere I've been, is very open. They just come at you with open arms and are super accepting, and that's one of the greatest parts about it. And yeah, I would recommend it to anyone that feels like maybe they're struggling even a little bit. Your story doesn't have to be that you've been to 10 treatments. It doesn't have to be that you even have justice involvement. If you're just a little worried with how you're handling, you know, substances or alcohol in your life, and you want another person to talk to, show up to a recovery church, show up to Celebrate Recovery, show up to an AA meeting, and you will find someone there who will talk to you.
Absolutely. Well, Jamie, I just appreciate you so much, and you know, opening up and sharing a little bit about what you do and your own journey.
Yeah.
I think that this is going to help some people. So
I hope so. This has been really good, and I appreciate you asking me. And yeah, like we always say, if it just gets one person thinking or affects just one person, then, you know, it's always worth it. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring journey of strength and recovery. If you found this episode meaningful, please consider subscribing to The Pure Perspective to stay updated on our upcoming episodes. Your support means the world to us, and by sharing these stories, you're helping to spread hope and resilience to those who may need it most. Remember, you're not alone on your journey, and together we can make a difference. Subscribe now, and let's keep moving forward one story at a time.